mistake to ignore the wishes of the people and ignore these primaries.
And you would not be willing to join with Mr. Humphrey in order to help the Democratic Party win if it comes to that?
In what way?
As Vice President.
In what order?
Well, you would be second.
No, well, no, I wouldn't. I'd be glad to help the Democratic Party. I believe in the Democratic Party. In what way, of course, I would have to work out. But because particularly as Richard Nixon is the nominee of the Republican Party, which I think is unacceptable to the country. And I have strong disagreements, as I say, with Hubert Humphrey and the position that he espouses, and particularly what he said this week, that he would step aside if Lyndon Johnson then decides that he wants to run, that he'll then step aside. That I don't understand.
You thought that was fairly shoddy politics, I take it.
No, again, Roger, I don't think that you're either in it or you're not in it. And you don't say, I'm in the middle of it and I want these delegates to support me, but if somebody else steps in, I'm going to step aside. That doesn't make any sense. At least it doesn't seem to make sense to me. What I would like to do is to, and what I think would be helpful to the Democratic Party, if we met and had a series of discussions or debates about where we're going and where we are at the present time and where we're going as far as the future is concerned. I think what is most unfortunate is that he didn't come into any of the primaries, that the Vice President didn't.
You said a moment ago that you would support the nominee of the Democratic Party, even if he were Hubert Humphrey, in a way that would have to be worked out later. Are you saying that you haven't decided whether you would campaign for him?
Well, let me put it this way, that I'm in it to win and to try to talk about what I will do if I lose. It doesn't seem to me very profitable.
No. Senator, as a result of this presumed California victory, do you think now that there will be a further delay in the movement of the big city politicians?
Well, I think we've had some success in that up to the present time in Michigan and Ohio, which I think is very important. And so I would hope now that I'm free to go back and talk to some of them, and also to talk to the people themselves in these various states and talk about really what are the issues. I think that these primaries have indicated to the people in those states what the issues are, and they've clearly rejected the position that is being espoused by the Vice President, overwhelmingly. And I think the people in the other states will, and so that's why I think that the Democratic Party would make such a mistake if it doesn't recognize that.
Are some of the delegates that are listed as leaning or even committed to the Vice President, are they squeezable? Are they solid?
Roger, you use the expression.
Well, isn't that the way you talk behind closed doors?
No, I don't. Maybe somebody else does.
But I mean, are they still up for grabs, even though they're listed?
I'm going to make an effort with them, although they are listed. And and it's the first really opportunity that I've had at all, because I've been involved in these various primaries.
Thank you. I'll work on my language for the next time, Senator. Thank you.
Good morning. This is Joseph Benty at CBS News headquarters in New York. What you have just seen was an interview with Senator Robert Kennedy minutes before he went downstairs in the Ambassador Hotel to a ballroom, the Embassy Room. There he was greeted by a crowd of his supporters to celebrate the victory in the California primary, a victory coupled with another victory, that in South Dakota. The political joy of the night was soon shattered, though. Shortly after the senator spoke and others of his supporters spoke to the crowd, he turned to leave. He stepped down from the speaker's platform, went through a door leading to a kitchen, an easy way out to avoid the crowds. And there, standing in the aisleway, a man pulled a gun, fired at the senator. The senator was hit twice. 4 other people were wounded. Senator Kennedy was then taken to the Central Receiving Hospital in Los Angeles. It is a 24-hour-a-day emergency hospital used primarily to treat wounded policemen and firemen. He was given immediate emergency treatment and then rushed to Good Samaritan Hospital, which also has a well-known, highly professional intensive care unit. There, neurosurgeons were standing by. A team of 6 then began operating on the senator just about an hour ago. They were probing for a bullet which, according to the senator's press secretary, had lodged in the senator's brain. It had entered the right side of his head through the mastoid bone, and that was the main focus of the operation. We still have no report yet as to whether the operation was successful, nor do we have any indication as to what the senator's condition is beyond what we were told by Frank Mankiewicz, which is he is in very critical condition. His body functions apparently are all good, but the size, the depth, the extent of the wound is not known. We have had no report on that. For more on the assailant and the shooting incident itself, CBS News correspondent Walter Cronkite.
Joe, Police Chief Thomas Redden of Los Angeles has issued a short statement regarding the suspect, the alleged gunman. He says this about him: "We don't know who the suspect is. He has made no statement. He would not speak, except once he said yes. We describe him as a male Caucasian, around 25, 5 feet 5, and about 120 pounds, swarthy complexion. His hair is described as wiry or bushy." He apparently fired all of the 8 shots in the magazine of a .22 caliber revolver. Those shots taking effect in Senator Kennedy and 4 other persons, as far as we have been able to determine, with some still rather confused reports and incomplete identification on all of the others wounded. One witness said that those shots came so close together that he could scarcely believe they were fired from one gun. A reporter heard the shots from an adjoining room, said they sounded almost like they came from a machine gun. So short was the burst of fire. All 8 of the bullets apparently having been fired. We should make this point, at this point, during the course of reporting developments in the shooting of Senator Kennedy. We shall also report some details as they become available on the alleged assailant, as indeed we just have. Any such details on the tragedy are only preliminary reports. They are not evidence of guilt. Everybody is presumed innocent until proved guilty. It's ultimately for a jury to decide, and judgment of guilt should be withheld until then. One other note here, Joe. Vice President Hubert Humphrey, as we have reported earlier, was in Colorado Springs for a speech today at the commencement services at the Air Force Academy. He has now canceled his scheduled commencement speech at the Academy and is making plans to return to Washington, as indeed is Senator McCarthy, canceling his further campaign plans. He was going to Seattle today. He's returning to Washington with his family, which has been under guard ever since this incident occurred in Los Angeles. We know that President Johnson has been advised of the accident by Walt Rostow, or the shooting, but has not made a formal statement as yet.
Walter, to give you the official language, or as official as can be determined at this time, from Frank Mankiewicz, the press secretary to Senator Kennedy, this is a quote now, the statement that Mankiewicz made outside of the Good Samaritan Hospital shortly after the senator had been admitted to the hospital, where he had been rushed from another emergency hospital. And just about 5 minutes before the 6-man team of neurosurgeons began their operation. Quote, "He has one," that is Senator Kennedy, "superficial scalp wound and one very critical wound. A bullet entered his right mastoid bone and has gone to the middle of the skull. That bullet is lodged in his brain, and they will operate in a few minutes to try and remove it. The doctors described his condition, Senator Kennedy's condition, as very critical," unquote. This statement from Frank Mankiewicz, the most official statement we've had as to the senator's condition and precisely what occurred in terms of the actual wounds he suffered. The operation began exactly 1 hour ago, if Mr. Mankiewicz's time was correct in trying to assess when the neurosurgeons would begin their operation. The surgeons will be probing undoubtedly to retrieve that bullet, to try and remove it from the brain. And as one might expect, there is obviously no way at this time to know precisely what the outcome will be, nor the extent of the damages. Simply, Senator Robert F. Kennedy is in very critical condition, the victim of a gunshot wound fired by an unknown assailant. The alleged assailant is now in police custody, but still unidentified. The chronology, once again, in terms of the times and how it happened, at 3:15 a.m. New York time, Senator Kennedy was shot, wounded twice, hit twice, once superficially and once in the head, at the Ambassador Hotel. He had just addressed a crowd of supporters upon the victory that he had just scored in the California Democratic presidential primary. At 3:39 a.m. New York time, he arrived at Los Angeles Central Receiving Hospital. I imagine the thinking at the time was to get him immediately to the nearest hospital, which happened to be Central Receiving, and then secondarily to a hospital that would be equipped to give him immediate emergency care. Once at Central Receiving, he undoubtedly was ministered to when he left the hospital on a stretcher. He had an oxygen mask covering his face. His eyes were closed. Apparently he had been put under sedation, and accompanying the stretcher was a bottle of plasma, apparently to keep his condition functioning as best as possible. At 3:55 New York time, he was transferred to Good Samaritan Hospital, where a neurosurgeon was waiting for his arrival. At 5:15 New York time, Senator Kennedy's aides reported that he was breathing steadily, that the bleeding had been stopped, and that his heartbeat was regular. At 5:35 New York time, that is 1 hour and approximately 2 minutes ago, the operation began, and that operation was conducted by 6 neurosurgeons, a team that had been assembled at the Good Samaritan Hospital, which is well known in Los Angeles for its intensive care unit. The 6-man team began its operation, probing for the bullet that had lodged in Senator Kennedy's brain. The operation was expected to last from 45 minutes to an hour, which would mean that at least by this time the operation should have been concluded. And I imagine the next immediate report coming out of Los Angeles will be from Good Samaritan Hospital with some kind of a disposition of the senator based on the achievements of the 6-man team of neurosurgeons that performed that surgery. We're still waiting for that report. We have 2 correspondents there on the scene, so as you might expect, as soon as it is released, we will have it for you. As to the identity of the gunman or any news concerning the gunman, it is our responsibility to say to those of you who are expecting some announcement that during the course of the developments here and the reporting of the aftermath of the shooting of Senator Kennedy, whatever details we have available on the assailant, we will make known to you, but any such details should be treated strictly as preliminary reports and not, we repeat, not as evidence of any guilt. As is our custom in this country, we presume innocence until proven guilty, and we leave the determination of guilt to a jury. And so any news regarding the assailant should be treated in that light. CBS News correspondent John Hart is at the police station in Los Angeles where he has this late report. John? John, come in.
Yes, Joe. Chief Tom Redden of the Los Angeles Police Department has just completed a news conference in which he described the wounds of Senator Kennedy as one in the head with no exit wound, on the right side of the head by the ear near the base of the brain. He was also shot in the right shoulder, and his condition is described as extremely critical. He is in surgery now. In attendance are 3 neurosurgeons at the Good Samaritan Hospital in Los Angeles. The suspect reportedly was apprehended by Rosie Greer of the Los Angeles Rams and disarmed of a .22 caliber 8-shot Iver Johnson pistol, which was handed to Rayford Johnson, also standing nearby. The senator is now under surgery, as we said. Mrs. Kennedy is with him in the hospital. The suspect has a swarthy complexion by description. He does not talk. He was under interrogation for approximately 15 minutes, in which we are told he said only one word, and that is yes. He shows no emotion, and when offered an attorney, gave no response. Representatives of the district attorney's office in Los Angeles are said to be in on all interrogations, and the legalities of legal assistance will be observed as promised by Chief Redden. Also, it was noted that all interrogation will be tape recorded.
John?
Yes, Joe.
The pistol that they have, it has been determined that it was the one that fired all the shots and that there was no other weapon or no other persons.
As far as they know, there was only one assailant, and examination of the chamber indicated that 8 shots had been fired from that weapon. There were, pardon me, there were 3 other people wounded.
John, I hate to interrupt you. That's about the 4th conflicting report now we've had on the wounded. We saw a young man and a woman, and we know that Paul Schrade was wounded, and apparently a man from ABC, which would make 5. Can you confirm the exact number who were wounded?
The reason I said 3 is that Chief Redden cannot confirm the woman, or the report of the woman being wounded.
Well, we have film of her being taken into central receiving, so apparently a total of 5 persons were hit.
That makes 5.
There is no doubt then that this was not a conspiracy, that it was clearly the act of an unknown one man.
I would not go that far. The man doesn't talk. Nothing is known about him. He had no identification on him. There were some papers taken out of his pocket that Chief Redden refuses to identify, but he said that they might make a basis of future investigation. The FBI has volunteered to enter the case and have sent back to Washington fingerprints for identification. That report should be back within an hour or so. A police picture will be released soon of the suspect.
All right, John Hart, I'm sure that you'll be standing by and we'll be waiting for your reports throughout the morning. Thank you. John Hart, reporting from the Los Angeles Police Department. And to continue where I left off prior to that report, very simply, whatever we say about this assailant in the hours to come should be borne in mind that these are preliminary reports and in no way indicate his guilt, that the guilt should be determined as per our system by a jury. The judgment of guilt will be made by a court of law and a jury chosen in that court of law. We now are going to repeat film that was taken shortly after the shooting incident by cameraman Jim Wilson, just as the senator just after he had been shot. And the film graphically shows you what happened.
This was the scene at Kennedy headquarters at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. Senator Kennedy just concluding a victory speech. The crowd in a riotous mood celebrating his apparent victory here in the California primary. Senator Kennedy then going off into the kitchen area to retire to his room for the evening, or at least for the next hour or so. Crowd spreading around him, shaking hands, clapping him on the back. Then some shots ring out. CBS News cameraman James Wilson filming this, and the next picture you see is that of Senator Kennedy lying on the floor. The crowd around him screaming, unbelieving that such a thing could happen. A score of hands beneath his back, beneath his head, trying to talk to him. At this time, it was understood that Senator Kennedy was conscious, although it was not understood if he said anything at all. Senator Kennedy now at Good Samaritan Hospital in Los Angeles, alive, we are understood, his heart beating. He's being treated by a neurosurgeon. Joe, this is the scene not too long ago. To set at Senator Kennedy has already arrived at Central Receiving Hospital. The patients arriving now are those who were also wounded with him in the shooting. One is one of 2 unidentified men who were with the Kennedy party in the kitchen during the shooting. This patient appears to be conscious and talking. The other is a woman identified only as a Mrs. Evans. She, as you note, is wounded in the head. It is understood from witnesses that she was shot in the leg, and as she crumpled to the ground, she apparently struck her head and suffered a gash on the forehead, streaming blood down her face. She is, we understand, in relatively good condition right now at Central Receiving Hospital. This was about 15 minutes after Senator Kennedy, the most critically wounded of all those 4 persons wounded in that shooting spree, was taken to Central Receiving Hospital. The scene you see now is Senator Kennedy being transferred to Good Samaritan Hospital, which is about 4 blocks away in downtown Los Angeles. Senator Kennedy, as we said, the most seriously wounded. They have better facilities, we understand, here for operating room procedures, and a neurosurgeon who is in resident there, Dr. Reed, who is now, we understand, operating on the senator. Dick Tuck, the man talking to the policeman, Senator Kennedy's longtime press aide, shooing the reporters away. The scene as we've seen all night of sorrow, heartbreak. Senator Kennedy now with a bullet wound in his temple, which the slug has lodged in the rear of his skull, we understand, according to Frank Mankiewicz, now undergoing surgery momentarily. Richard Trelkeld, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Neither U.S. Ambassador Sergeant Shriver nor his wife, who is Senator Robert Kennedy's sister, plan at the moment to return to the United States because of the shooting of Senator Kennedy. A spokesman for the United States Embassy today made that announcement. Mrs. Shriver is expected to go ahead with her first courtesy call today on Mrs. de Gaulle, wife of President de Gaulle. Shriver arrived in Paris on May 8th to take over his duties. The spokesman said news of the shooting reached Paris while Shriver was en route to his office. He was told as soon as he arrived. The ambassador was deeply shocked. He immediately telephoned his wife. The spokesman said Shriver had been in touch with the United States 2 or 3 times by telephone by mid-morning, but was still going ahead with a full-day schedule. The shock, of course, is universal from all that is coming into the CBS News headquarters here in New York. The reaction is almost uniform. First, horror, grief, shock at what happens in the United States, a kind of sense of guilt for, I guess, all Americans, thinking that the bullet seems to be much too common in this country, especially in this case where it is the brother of the assassinated president who was the next well-known political figure in America to be shot by an assailant. CBS News correspondent Terry Drinkwater has been on the scene at the Ambassador Hotel all night, covering not only the speech Senator Kennedy gave, the aftermath, but has been talking to eyewitnesses, and he is now standing by with another eyewitness report, so we'll switch to Los Angeles.
I gave him a pair of rosary beads, which are from Ireland, I told him, and he looked straight up, and I was wondering what this meant. I got a little frightened to see him looking straight up, but he looked at me. I said, the act of contrition, I'm a Roman Catholic. A Roman Catholic is trained to do this in the case of any serious accident. I said to the president, the act of contrition, slowly and audibly, and he heard it. I'm sure of it. He was breathing. He's alive. Please God. And I said to him, Mary, Queen of Peace, pray for us. And with that, he took my hand and the rosary beads and tightened.
Where was this? At what stage? What's your name?
This was right after he was shot. I heard a balloon pop, and I said to some woman, I said, what a terrible thing to have around here. These sounds, I said, it's not good for another Kennedy. And the woman said, don't be silly. And that's when I realized it wasn't a balloon.
And as we went out there, I was probably 7 to 8 feet because I'd gone back to help get Mrs. Ethel Kennedy through the crowd. And at that time, we heard the shots, and having a long background in shooting, I knew that it was shooting, and everybody started to hit the deck. And it was shots not from a revolver, because there was more than 5 shots fired. There's at least 7 that I counted. Kennedy was hit at least twice, I think, but then I came to the aid of Paul Schrady, who was hit right behind him, and the people did not see Mr. Schrady and were starting to step on him, and I straddled him and stayed there for the duration.
Paul Schrady, the man identified as another of the wounded, is an official, the regional director of the United Auto Workers. He has been a strong Kennedy supporter and very active in California politics. We have been told that his wound was not serious, that he will survive without any difficulties. Attorney General Ramsey Clark today said that he has ordered the Federal Bureau of Investigation into Los Angeles to investigate the shooting of Senator Kennedy. The quote, we have the jurisdiction under both the Voting Rights Act and the new Civil Rights Act of 1968 to investigate the crime. but he made it clear the primary role in the investigation is being handled by local law enforcement officers. Once again, the chronology of tragic events that have fallen once again on the Kennedy family. Senator Robert F. Kennedy shot at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, a tragedy that turned a victory celebration into near pandemonium as bullets were fired at the senator. Two hit him, and others struck out and hit 4 other people. There is still some confusion as to whether that is the actual number, 4, whether there were 5 more. One woman, which we saw on film not too long ago, apparently was not hit by a bullet, but had fallen and lacerated her head. At 3:15 a.m., this tragic series of events began. That's 3:15 New York time. The first reports came into CBS News headquarters of the shooting of Senator Kennedy. At 3:39 a.m., he was rushed to the Central Receiving Hospital in Los Angeles, an emergency hospital. At 3:55, he was transferred to the Good Samaritan Hospital, where he is now. It was at the Good Samaritan Hospital that a team, and again, more conflicting reports, between 3 and 6 neurosurgeons had operated on Senator Kennedy. The operation was only supposed to take anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour, which would mean that at the most it was over some 15 minutes ago, but we have not yet received any word on how the surgery progressed. I think the best way to sum up the extent of the senator's wound, the serious wound, he was hit twice. One was a superficial wound, but this is the one that the neurosurgeons were probing for. A bullet entered his right mastoid bone. These are the words of Frank Mankiewicz, his press secretary. It entered the right mastoid bone and has gone to the middle of the skull. That bullet is lodged in his brain, and the doctors will operate in a few minutes. That was an hour and 15 minutes ago, to try and remove it. The doctors, according to Mankiewicz, described Senator Kennedy's condition as very critical. The only optimistic note in terms of the medical bulletins was the further announcement from Mankiewicz that the senator's heart had been beating steadily, that he was breathing on his own, and that the bleeding had stopped. It was not really clear in the film that anyone had, or the still photos, how serious the senator's wound was. Apparently he was in a pool of blood. It was not noticed at the time, but he had been hit just above the right ear. And that is the serious wound, which of course is causing all of the concern, and for which we are awaiting word from the surgeons who operated on Senator Kennedy within the hour. We still have no indication whether that operation is over, whether it was a success, what the actual outcome is, what the prognosis is, how seriously damaged the senator's brain and his general physical condition are as a result of that wound. The operation began at 5:35, and as we note, still no indication yet as to how it turned out. There is, of course, the reassuring note, if there can be any reassurance in this kind of situation and this sort of tragedy, that the best medical care, fortunately, was available, unlike, and I suppose there will be a great propensity for reporters to remind us of what happened in 1963, but Senator Kennedy was accessible to immediate hospitalization. His brother, the late President Kennedy, as you may recall, had to be rushed quite a distance to Parkland Hospital in Dallas. Senator Kennedy was taken just a few blocks over surface streets to the Central Receiving Hospital, and there received immediate emergency attention. And it was at that point, apparently, that doctors decided at the emergency hospital, and again, due to the nature of the hospital, this kind of decision was fortunate. They treat many emergency cases, gunshot wounds, particularly of Los Angeles policemen. The doctors there probably determined that it would be best to move the senator on to Good Samaritan Hospital, and once again, luck was holding. Good Samaritan Hospital just a few blocks away. The announcement by Frank Mankiewicz, Senator Kennedy's press secretary, was recorded on videotape. You will see the words live on the bottom of the tape, but that was the way we recorded it when the announcement was made by Frank Mankiewicz.
A team of 6 neurosurgeons will start to operate on Senator Kennedy in about 5 or 10 minutes. He has one superficial shoulder wound and one very critical wound. The bullet which entered the right mastoid bone behind the right ear and has gone to the midline of the skull. That bullet is lodged in his brain, and they will operate within a very few minutes in an attempt to remove it. His breathing is good and unassisted. His heart is good. He's unconscious, and the doctors describe his condition as very critical. And that's all I can tell you, and I can't answer any questions.
Has he been conscious at all? He's not conscious. How long will the procedure take? How long will the surgery take?
I'm sorry. Mrs. Kennedy is with him. He's being taken up to surgery now, and the estimates are that the surgery may take 45 minutes to an hour.
That statement from Frank Mankiewicz, Senator Kennedy's press secretary, was made roughly an hour and a half ago. Some 5 to 10 minutes later, the operation began. The 6-man team of neurosurgeons probing for the bullet that had lodged in Senator Kennedy's brain. No report yet as to how that operation fared, how the senator fared, what his condition is, other than the announcement at the beginning of the operation that he is in very critical condition. The White House has now reacted to the shooting incident. The president was told early this morning, watched television for late reports, and CBS News White House correspondent Dan Rather is standing by in Washington with this late report.
The President has just issued the following statement at the White House through White House News Secretary George Christian. This is President Johnson's statement, and I quote from it directly. "There are no words equal to the horror of this tragedy. Our thoughts and our prayers are with Senator Kennedy, his family, and other victims. All America prays for his recovery. We also pray that divisiveness and violence be driven from the hearts of men everywhere." End of quotation, and that is the full statement of President Johnson issued just a few moments ago at the White House. As Joseph Menti mentioned, President Johnson was told of the shooting of Senator Kennedy in Los Angeles just a few minutes after it occurred by Walt W. Rostow, a presidential assistant who had been informed by the Situation Room, which operates 24 hours a day as the communications center of the White House. Hal Walker, a CBS reporter at Resurrection City, the headquarters for the Poor People's Campaign here in Washington, reports from the scene out at Resurrection City. They're within a short distance of the famed Lincoln Memorial, says that all is quiet out there, that there is a feeling of great shock, but that the situation is very quiet at this moment. No leaders of the Poor People's Campaign have yet been available for direct comment. Also, CBS reporter Bob Gregory, who is at the Kennedy home in McLean, Virginia, just across the Potomac River from Washington, reports that all is quiet there. The Fairfax County, Virginia Police Department has put a protective circle around the Kennedy home. Several secretaries of the Kennedy staff came out of the Kennedy home a few minutes ago, got into automobiles and said, "We are sorry, gentlemen," in speaking to reporters, "we are sorry, gentlemen, but we have airplanes to catch." The secretary said that no children, none of the Kennedy children, were in the home. However, reporter Gregory says that there is some indication that one or more of the children may in fact be in the home. Some of the Kennedy children were with the senator and his wife in California. That much is known. But whether any of the children are in the McLean home has not yet been confirmed. But there is a protective police circle around it. Some 15 to 17 people have gone in and out of the Kennedy home in McLean over the past several hours. The most prominent of those, the Chief U.S. Marshal, Mr. McShane, came to the home, and he said he came only as a friend of the family and would say nothing else. Repeating the statement just issued by President Johnson at the White House, and I quote again, "There are no words equal to the horror of this tragedy. Our thoughts and our prayers are with Senator Kennedy, his family, and the other victims. All America prays for his recovery. We also pray that divisiveness and violence be driven from the hearts of men everywhere." End of quotation from President Johnson. Joe?
Thank you, Dan. The irony, and indeed, I'm sure as this day goes on, there will be many moments of irony pointed out in this tragic event that once again has struck the Kennedy family. But the irony in this one and reminds one of what happened to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, how he had almost written his own eulogy the day before his assassination. Just before the shooting incident at the Ambassador Hotel, Senator Kennedy on the Speaker's platform, thanking his supporters there in the ballroom for their work, sharing with them the joy of having not only the California victory, which was the big one, but having captured as well the Democratic primary in South Dakota. The theme of what he had to say to them mainly centered on the need to rid this country of violence. It was not long after that that the senator turned, stepped down, went to make his way through an exit which led through a kitchen, and it was there in that small hallway just beside the door that the shots rang out, and the senator was struck twice. One superficial wound, another deep wound into the head above the right mastoid bone, the bullet lodging in his brain, and of course necessitating intensive, serious, critical surgery. A six-man team of neurosurgeons at the Good Samaritan Hospital in Los Angeles began their operation about an hour and a half ago. We've still had no word. The operation, it was estimated then, should have taken between 45 minutes and an hour, and we have not yet been told whether the operation is over, nor to what extent it was successful. And perhaps more important than that, the condition of Senator Kennedy after the operation. His body, like the Kennedy men, was a sturdy one, healthy, in the prime, as we were told earlier by Roger Mudd. Just that day at Malibu, where the Kennedy family was relaxing, one of the Kennedy sons had been swimming in the surf and apparently got caught in an undertow. And the senator rushed into the water and pulled his son out, saved his life. And if you had been watching earlier, you probably saw in the interview with Roger Mudd, Senator Kennedy, you perhaps did not notice that there was a bruise over his right eye, and that was the result of this incident at Malibu in the surf, the rescuing of his son from the undertow. Another note of irony. The reaction, as we have said, is coming in from all over the world. The senator's wife is with him, Ethel Kennedy. She went through immediate shock in the ballroom when she realized what had happened, and then gained her composure, made her way to both hospitals following her husband. The senator's brother, Ted Kennedy, is reported now at the hospital, the Good Samaritan Hospital. Vice President Hubert Humphrey, who was to have made the commencement address today at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, has canceled that. And Senator Eugene McCarthy has almost pulled himself out of any active appearances today. Undoubtedly will ask for some kind of a moratorium for at least some time until we know exactly what has happened and what its full impact will be. He did ask for the prayers of his supporters for the senator. We pause now for 5 seconds for station identification.
This is CBS.
This is Joseph Benty at CBS News headquarters in New York. Beginning this tragic story, a chronology of what has happened this morning. After midnight in Los Angeles, 3:15 a.m. New York time, shortly after midnight in Los Angeles, Senator Robert Kennedy had just addressed a crowd of his supporters and followers in a packed ballroom at the Ambassador Hotel. He turned, stepped off the speaker's platform, started to walk out through an exit which led to a kitchen and an easy access to his suite, avoiding the crowds that naturally would be there. There were other political candidates in the hotel. Senator, or at least the candidate for a Republican senatorial nomination, Max Rafferty, had his headquarters there. So there were many people in the hotel. He tried to find the easiest access both to the ballroom and out of it, and had settled on this way. And there, standing by a door, was an unknown, he is in custody now, but an unknown assailant who fired, according to police reports, 8 shots from a .22 caliber target pistol. 2 of the bullets hit Senator Kennedy, 1 seriously, above the right mastoid bone, lodging in his brain. 6 neurosurgeons at Good Samaritan Hospital in Los Angeles began an operation more than an hour and a half ago. There's still no word yet as to how well that operation has progressed, nor to the condition of Senator Kennedy, other than a pre-operative report from Frank Mankiewicz, the senator's press secretary, that the senator was in very critical condition. The senator is in Good Samaritan Hospital. His family is there, his wife at least, and his brother Ted. Ted himself having survived a near deadly airplane crash. And this is the scene at the Good Samaritan Hospital. A crowd outside, many of them reacting in grief to the events in Los Angeles this early morning, events that began shortly after midnight. The reaction here very much like the reaction at the ballroom, where the crowd immediately broke into tears, and some knelt on the floor to pray, others wondering what had happened, a general disbelief and shock that this could happen again, that this kind of tragedy could befall the Kennedys once again. There's still no way for us to tell you exactly how well the senator has gone through his operation. We're standing by, as you've seen with that remote unit, for a report from Good Samaritan Hospital. President Johnson has issued his statement regarding the shooting. He was up very early this morning, shortly after the shooting, informed of it. He turned on some television sets in the White House and brought himself up to date on what had happened, and then he issued this statement just a short time ago, and I'm quoting President Johnson: "There are no words equal to the horror of this tragedy. Our thoughts and our prayers are with Senator Kennedy, his family, and the other victims. All America prays for his recovery. We also pray that divisiveness and violence may be driven from the hearts of men everywhere." Violence happened to be the theme of Senator Kennedy's remarks to his supporters in that hotel room just before the shooting incident. He had said essentially what the President's comments had just said, that we must rid the nation of violence. Attorney General Ramsey Clark said early today that he has ordered the FBI into the investigation. He said he has the power to do that under the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. And he said, however, that the primary role in the investigation will be handled by the local law enforcement agencies. Reaction was swift from most of Europe, where it is daylight, or was daylight when this occurred. There were blazing headlines in the papers in Paris and in London. The man on the street reacted with horror and shock. Our servicemen in Vietnam reacted, some of them angrily, many of them saying they wish they could get their hands on the one who did this, wondering what kind of a country this was, where a man risked his life running for the presidency. Comments like that from our fighting men in Vietnam. U.S. Ambassador Sergeant Shriver today said that he and his wife, Senator Robert F. Kennedy's sister Eunice, and Mrs. Edward Kennedy, the wife of the Massachusetts senator, are making arrangements to fly to the United States if necessary. Mrs. Edward Kennedy is in Paris with the Shrivers after she visited Dublin. Up to date visually on what happened at the Ambassador Hotel.
This was the scene at Kennedy headquarters at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. Senator Kennedy just concluding a victory speech. The crowd in a riotous mood celebrating his apparent victory here in the California primary. Senator Kennedy then going off into the kitchen area to retire to his room for the evening, or at least for the next hour or so. Crowd spreading around him, shaking hands, clapping him on the back. Then some shots ring out. CBS News cameraman James Wilson filming this, and the next picture you see is that of Senator Kennedy lying on the floor. The crowd around him screaming, unbelieving that such a thing could happen. A score of hands beneath his back, beneath his head, trying to talk to him. At this time, it was understood that Senator Kennedy was conscious, although it was not understood if he said anything at all. Senator Kennedy now at Good Samaritan Hospital in Los Angeles, alive, we are understood. His heart beating. He's being treated by a neurosurgeon. Joe, this is the scene not too long ago. To set at Senator Kennedy has already arrived at Central Receiving Hospital. The patients arriving now are those who were also wounded with him in the shooting. One is one of two unidentified men who were with the Kennedy party in the kitchen during the shooting. This patient appears to be conscious and talking. The other is a woman identified only as Mrs. Evans. She, as you note, is wounded in the head. It is understood from witnesses that she was shot in the leg, and as she crumpled to the ground, she apparently struck her head and suffered a gash on the forehead, streaming blood down her face. She is, we understand, in relatively good condition right now at Central Receiving Hospital. This was about 15 minutes after Senator Kennedy, the most critically wounded of all those 4 persons wounded in that shooting spree, was taken to Central Receiving Hospital. The scene you see now is Senator Kennedy being transferred to Good Samaritan Hospital, which is about 4 blocks away in downtown Los Angeles. Senator Kennedy, as we said, the most seriously wounded. They have better facilities, we understand, here for operating room procedures, and a neurosurgeon who is in resident there, Dr. Reed, who is now, we understand, operating on the senator. Dick Tuck, the man talking to the policeman, Senator Kennedy's longtime press aide, shooing the reporters away. The scene as we've seen all night of sorrow, heartbreak. Senator Kennedy now with a bullet wound in his temple, which the slug has lodged in the rear of his skull, we understand, according to Frank Mankiewicz, now undergoing surgery momentarily. Richard Trelkeld, CBS News, Los Angeles.
About an hour and a half after those scenes, Frank Mankiewicz, the press secretary to Senator Kennedy, appeared before the Good Samaritan Hospital and gave this medical statement as to what was going on and what was happening in the hospital.
We'll start to operate on Senator Kennedy in about 5 or 10 minutes. He has one superficial shoulder wound and one very critical wound, a bullet which entered the right mastoid bone behind the right ear and has gone to the midline of the skull. That bullet is lodged in his brain, and they will operate within a very few minutes in an attempt to remove it. His breathing is good and unassisted. His heart is good. He's unconscious, and the doctors describe his condition as very critical. And that's all I can tell you, and I can't answer any questions.
Has he been conscious at all? He's not. How long do you think the procedure will take? How long will the surgery take?
I'm sorry. Mrs. Kennedy is with him. He's being taken up for surgery now, and the estimates are that the surgery may take 45 minutes to an hour.
That was an hour and 45 minutes ago. We have not been told yet whether the surgery has ended. We have not been given any other additional condition reports from the Good Samaritan Hospital. All we know is, officially all we know, is what Frank Mankiewicz just told us, or told us in that recorded statement that he made in front of the hospital. And if the surgery has lasted this long, undoubtedly there has been a great deal of effort on the part of the neurosurgeons to locate that bullet in their probing and remove it from the senator's brain. The man apprehended at the time as the alleged assailant is being held by the Los Angeles police. He said one word, according to Police Chief Redden, and that was yes. According to some eyewitnesses, a man who was the alleged assailant at the scene was to have said, "I did it for my country," and that was all that was said there. There's no indication as to who he is. The fingerprints have been taken and sent to the FBI in Washington. They should be back in about an hour, according to CBS News correspondent John Hart. Throughout our reporting of this tragic event, we will, as details become available, of course, on the assailant, be making them available to you. And as we do, I think we should stress to you that it would be good to bear in mind these are just preliminary reports. In our form of jurisprudence here, everyone is presumed innocent until they are proved guilty in a court of law. And any decision as to the guilt or innocence of of this man that is being held will have to await a decision of a jury chosen in a court of law. His presumption of innocence, of course, continues until otherwise found by a court. The man being held is also identified as being approximately 5 feet 5, weighing 130 pounds, and no other identification. A gun was recovered. It was a .22 caliber revolver, apparently capable of firing 8 shots, and according to police, the revolver they have, all 8 shots, bullets that were contained, were fired. CBS News correspondent Roger Mudd is standing by now at Good Samaritan Hospital. Here's his report. Roger?
It has now been almost 2 hours since the operation on Senator Kennedy's brain began here at the Good Samaritan Hospital in Los Angeles. It was at 2:22 this morning, Pacific time, when the Senator's press secretary, Frank Mankiewicz, announced that the Senator had suffered 2 wounds, the most serious of which, a bullet wound through the right mastoid bone, the bullet lodging in the center of his brain. The press secretary said that the operation would last about 45 minutes to an hour, to be performed by a team of 6 neurosurgeons. That was almost 2 hours ago. We have had no report since then. All we've done is to wait. The only fresh development since Mr. Mankiewicz's report here was that the Los Angeles Police Department made a John Doe booking tonight of the suspect in the attempted killing of Senator Kennedy. John Doe means that that's a fictitious name. No true name is given. The charge was intent to murder. The weapon was described by Police Chief Redding as a .22 8-shot revolver with all 8 shots discharged in the kitchen behind the ballroom at the Ambassador Hotel tonight. Roger Mudd, CBS News, Los Angeles.
The condition of Senator Kennedy was described by Frank Mankiewicz before, and very simply, the team of neurosurgeons were concentrating on an area by the mastoid bone on the right side of the senator's head. A bullet lodged in his brain. His condition very critical. CBS News White House correspondent Dan Rather is standing by now in Washington. Dan?
President Johnson, we're told by White House News Secretary George Christian, has spoken with Senator Ted Kennedy, Senator Theodore Kennedy, in Los Angeles and expressed his sympathy and offered all of the help, any help that he, the president, could personally extend, any help that might be necessary on behalf of this country. In addition to speaking with Senator Ted Kennedy, President Johnson, we're told, has ordered Secret Service protection for all announced presidential candidates, all of the leading announced candidates, including Alabama Governor George Wallace. Secret Service protection has not been heretofore a matter of course with the candidates. The candidates have had their own protective groups around them, including former Governor Wallace of Alabama has had his own protective police group. But President Johnson this morning, we're told, has ordered Secret Service protection for all of the leading announced candidates, including former Governor Wallace. Just to recapitulate other developments here in Washington, all quiet in Resurrection City, the headquarters of the Poor People's Campaign. CBS reporter Hal Walker, who is there, says that those in Resurrection City were a bit slower in getting the news because of the extreme lack of communications down there. But as the people in Resurrection City awakened this morning, there was deep sorrow, tears, nodding of heads in almost disbelief about what had happened, but all is quiet there. From the home of Senator Robert Kennedy in suburban McLean, Virginia, just across the river in Virginia, all quiet there. A police protective circle was put around the house immediately upon the news arriving in Washington of the attempted assassination of Senator Kennedy. We still do not know whether any of the Kennedy children are in the home. We've been told that most of the Kennedy children, if not all of them, were in California. There have been a number of secretaries in and out of the Kennedy home out there. CBS News reporter Bob Gregory, who is on the scene, says that he has seen none of the Kennedy children there. A number of statements of horror, sorrow, prayers for the Kennedy family coming from all leaders on Capitol Hill and in the House and the Senate, and President Johnson, who was informed of the shooting just minutes after it occurred by White House aide Walt Rostow, has issued a statement this morning expressing his sympathy, extending his sympathy to the Kennedy family, and praying for the recovery of Senator Kennedy. And the president's statement also saying and calling on the nation to pray for an end to what the president called the divisiveness and violence among men everywhere. Joe?
Thank you, Dan. Very quickly, to give you some idea of if there is a fortunate side to this in terms of immediate medical attention, Senator Kennedy was shot and wounded critically at 3:15 a.m. New York time. Within 25 minutes, he was in an emergency hospital. Another 40 minutes, or 40 minutes from the time he was shot, he was then transferred to the Good Samaritan Hospital, which has a well-known intensive care unit, and within 2 hours and 20 minutes, a team of 6 neurosurgeons had begun their operation to try and retrieve or repair whatever damage had been caused by the bullet which had entered the senator's head on the right side and lodged in his brain. We still have no word as to how that operation turned out, but we do have a pretty good idea of the early medical treatment which was given to Senator Kennedy by one of 5 doctors who was on hand in the Ambassador Hotel when the senator was shot. He is Dr. Ross Miller, interviewed by CBS News correspondent Terry Drinkwater.
Was one of the first who came to Senator Kennedy's side. Can you describe the senator's wounds?
Well, they were a mass of blood, and he had head injuries. The extent of them could not be ascertained immediately. We proceeded to give him emergency care, and at the receiving hospital, emergency procedures were started. He was given blood dextran, which is a blood substitute, and albumin and oxygen, and at that point his vital signs were stable. The extent of his injuries could not be ascertained at the emergency hospital.
Where was he hit?
He was hit in the face, and because of the blood, we didn't probe any of the wounds. We didn't do anything because he was being transferred for definitive treatment, and it would have been dangerous to begin any probing of wounds at that point.
Was he fully conscious, Doctor?
No.
What, if you can tell us now, is the general prognosis for someone who was in this condition, who was hit in that?
I would be unable to give a prognosis unless I could ascertain the extent of the injuries.
Before he became unconscious, did he say anything at all?
No, not while I was with him.
What type of first treatment did you and the other doctors who rushed to his side give?
The injury was, a dressing was applied and a tamponade to prevent any external bleeding, and he was placed on a cot for transfer to the receiving hospital. At the receiving hospital, emergency procedures were instituted. He was given oxygen and intravenous feedings as indicated, and following this, his vital signs were taken to ascertain his state, and he was immediately transferred to the Good Samaritan Hospital.
Were his vital signs good? Were they an indicator? His pulse, breathing?
Well, his pulse was rapid but full and bounding, and his heartbeat was good. This is encouraging. It indicates that his immediate injuries were not incapacitating to that extent.
Was there a prolonged wait? It seemed like a very long time for those of us outside the door before he was transferred, taken away from the ambassador.
In all honesty, I must say that I have no knowledge of time because I was very concerned and very involved during this period, and I have no knowledge of time.
How many others were hit, Doctor?
I know of 2 others. I also took care of Paul Schrade. I did not go in the ambulance to the receiving hospital with the senator because there was another physician who was in the ambulance. I stayed with Paul Schrade. He had a deep laceration of the forehead. Apparently the bullet that hit him ricocheted off the scalp, and although he had a great deal of blood loss and there was a lot of blood around, apparently his injuries are not critical.
Did you take Senator Kennedy's pulse?
Yes, I did.
What was it?
It was 130, which is very rapid, but it was full and bounding, and
but not critically rapid at that point.
Well, it would depend on the extent of the injuries. It could be.
There have been several reports about the direction from which the bullet or bullets were fired. Could you clarify those as a medical man? Can you tell us, was he hit just in the head or on the side or in the back of the neck?
Well, he had blood all over his face, and we didn't probe the wounds. There was blood, and we only dressed the wound immediately and started proceedings to transfer him to another hospital.
So you're really not sure from those first...
That's correct.
Did Mrs. Kennedy come up to you at the time you were treating the senator? And so
well,
what did she say?
She was there at the receiving hospital during the entire period, along with Pierre Salinger and John Glenn and other members of his immediate party.
How did Mrs. Kennedy appear to take this?
Well, obviously she was terribly upset. I thought she handled herself excellently. She was not in a state of panic. She was deeply concerned about her husband, having gone through a similar episode. I'm sure she was desperately concerned. She acted gallantly and courageously, and I think she handled herself with the greatest degree of composure under the circumstances.
That was the early reaction of a surgeon who was on the scene when Senator Kennedy was shot and apparently accompanied him to Central Receiving Hospital. An interview with CBS News correspondent Terry Drinkwater and the doctor's name, Ross Miller, a Los Angeles surgeon. To clarify now and add to what he has said, this is the only official word we have had regarding Senator Robert F. Kennedy's condition at the Good Samaritan Hospital in Los Angeles, where approximately 2 hours ago, a team of 6 neurosurgeons began their operation on the senator. This was a statement made by Frank Mankiewicz, who is the press secretary to Senator Kennedy. Quoting him, a team of 6 neurosurgeons will start to operate on Senator Kennedy in about 5 or 10 minutes. That was 2 hours ago. He has 1 superficial scalp wound and 1 very critical wound. A bullet entered his right mastoid bone and has gone to the middle of the skull. That bullet is lodged in his brain. They will operate in a few minutes to try and remove it. The doctors, according to Press Secretary Frank Mankiewicz, described Senator Kennedy's condition as very critical. The end of the statement made by Frank Mankiewicz was noted that the senator's heart was beating steadily, he was breathing on his own, and that bleeding had stopped. And the operation began roughly 2 hours ago. Still no word as to its outcome or the senator's condition. We pause now for 5 seconds for station identification.
This is CBS.
This is Joseph Benty at CBS News headquarters in New York. Recapitulating now what has happened since shortly after midnight, Pacific Coast time, 3:15 New York time, Senator Robert F. Kennedy was shot shot by an unknown assailant as the senator stepped off a speaker's platform and turned and was about to make an exit from the ballroom where his supporters were celebrating his victory in the California primary, the Democratic presidential primary, and also a victory in the primary in South Dakota. As the president entered through a door into a hallway leading to a kitchen, an unknown man fired. As the senator entered, an unknown man, or a man who is now in custody but whose identity is unknown, fired at the senator. 2 shots hit the senator. 1 is a superficial wound, 1 is critical. We have videotape now of the scene immediately following the shooting. You will see the pandemonium as it begins to take hold of that audience or that crowd of Kennedy supporters waiting for the senator. And we begin to see, at first it was thought that this was simply some of the crowd reaction, which has been typical of the senator's public appearances wherever he went throughout his campaigning in these primaries. He attracted large crowds, and they were all very frantic, grabbing at his outstretched hands and often placing him in great physical jeopardy. But now it's clear the shock has just reached the speaker's platform. That was where the senator had just spoken, and he had addressed the crowd saying to them that violence in the United States must end. An ironic theme to the comments to his supporters. CBS News correspondent Terry Drinkwater there on the platform with the shocked Kennedy supporters, young people in their Kennedy hats, others not quite believing what they're hearing as word begins to filter down and inform others that The senator has been shot. People try to rush forward. Of course, this simply created a near stampede and complicated, or could have complicated, the situation, an attempt to remove the senator from the hotel. You will see now one of the supporters come to the microphone and then another requesting that a doctor please come forward. The young girl has obviously now been told what has happened. Here comes the supporter calling for a doctor.
Keep me plugged in.
Please stay back. Everybody else, just please stay back. Just a doctor, come right here.
Let's roll some videotape on this out here, friends.
Would a doctor come right here? A doctor, we need a doctor right here. The microphone,
Fortunately,
please.
there were 5 doctors in that crowd, and they managed to get back to the senator. He was stretched out in that hallway just behind the door off to the side of that speaker's platform. Now here comes Stephen Smith, the senator's brother-in-law.
Quiet! Quiet, please. Quiet, please.
And there is Senator Kennedy's sister.
Do here is in an orderly way leave. Would you please do that? Just in an orderly way, clear the room. Can we do that, please? Quiet, please. Best thing and the most helpful thing that everyone can do here is to leave the room in an orderly way. Now, will you please do that for us? Will you please do that? Will you move out quietly, please? We don't know what's happened, but all of this noise and confusion is not going to help. So will you please clear the room? Will you please clear the room in an orderly fashion? Thank you.
That Stephen Smith, Senator Kennedy's brother-in-law, trying to establish some kind of order in an obvious scene of pandemonium. There's apparently one of the wounded persons being taken out of the ballroom. Grief evident everywhere, disbelief, shock, all of the adjectives to describe the reaction to the certainly tragic event, which just is another in a long list of tragedies that seems to stalk the Kennedy family. People standing up asking for order.
Ladies and gentlemen, you can cooperate with the sympathies. Yeah, we've got a doctor. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a doctor now. Will you please clear the room and offer your prayers at this hour? Let us please clear the room. Your greatest help will be to clear this room. Will you please clear the room?
Would everyone please clear the room? You can help us most by clearing the room, please. Everyone leave.
Will you please clear this room so that we can get medical aid to the senator?
If you do not leave the room, we cannot get medical aid to the senator. Now, would you please leave, or would you rather stand and cause confusion?
Will you please clear the room so that we can clear this room for medical aid for the senator?
Are there any more doctors in the
Our
house?
greatest help at this time is to help clear this room.
Are there any more doctors?
Will you please clear the room to help get medical aid for the senator?
Right
Would
here.
you please clear the room and proceed to the exits?
Will you please clear the room so that we can get medical aid for the senator?
Are there any more doctors in the house?
Ladies and
Please
gentlemen,
respond.
I would like you to clear this room. We have an emergency.
Would you clear the
here.
room, please?
Please leave the room.
Let me, this is drink water.
Please, we need
here,
you immediately.
You were in there and you saw what happened.
Yes, I did.
What happened?
I'm sorry, I can't make any comments. I'm not...
Please, somebody help us.
Would everyone please
Let's
clear
get
the
him out
room?
of here.
Would you please clear the room, please, so that we can bring medical attention to the senator? Please clear the room. Please clear the room, please. Clear the
An indication
room.
now that the Senator Kennedy himself has been wounded. The repeated calls for a doctor. The room now is still about half filled with supporters who were so enthusiastically cheering the senator a short time ago. 2 doctors have been moved into this
CBS News cameraman James Wilson filming this, and the next picture you see is that of Senator Kennedy lying on the floor. The crowd around him screaming, unbelieving that such a thing could happen. A score of hands beneath his back, beneath his head, trying to talk to him. At this time, it was understood that Senator Kennedy was conscious, although it was not understood if he said anything at all. Senator Kennedy now at Good Samaritan Hospital in Los Angeles, alive, we are understood, his heart beating. He's being treated by a neurosurgeon. Joe, this is the scene not too long ago. To set at Senator Kennedy has already arrived at Central Receiving Hospital. The patients arriving now are those who are also wounded with him in the shooting. One is one of 2 unidentified men who were with the Kennedy party in the kitchen during the shooting. This patient appears to be conscious and talking. The other is a woman identified only as a Mrs. Evans. She, as you note, is wounded in the head. It is understood from witnesses that she was shot in the leg, and as she crumpled to the ground, she apparently struck her head and suffered a gash on the forehead, streaming blood down her face. She is, we understand, in relatively good condition right now at Central Receiving Hospital. This was about 15 minutes after Senator Kennedy, the most critically wounded of all those 4 persons wounded in that shooting spree, was taken to Central Receiving Hospital. The scene you see now is Senator Kennedy being transferred to Good Samaritan Hospital, which is about 4 blocks away in downtown Los Angeles. Senator Kennedy, as we said, the most seriously wounded. They have better facilities, we understand, here for operating room procedures, and a neurosurgeon who is in resident there, Dr. Reed, who is now, we understand, operating on the senator. Dick Tuck, the man talking to the policeman, Senator Kennedy's longtime press aide, shooing the reporters away. The scene as we've seen all night of sorrow, heartbreak. Senator Kennedy now with a bullet wound in his temple, which the slug has lodged in the rear of his skull, we understand, according to Frank Mankiewicz, now undergoing surgery momentarily.
All that you have just seen was from that point when the senator stepped off that speaker's platform until he was put into that ambulance was an elapsed time of 40 minutes. At this moment, he is in the Good Samaritan Hospital in Los Angeles. A 6-man team of neurosurgeons began operating more than 2 hours ago. We still have not been told whether that operation has concluded, nor have we been given any indication of the senator's condition beyond the simple statement that he is in very critical condition. 1 bullet lodged in his brain. It entered his head in the right mastoid area, lodging in the brain, and that is the chief target of the neurosurgical team that attempted to retrieve the slug. 40 minutes elapsed in the film that you just saw, but now we have new film involving the unknown assailant, or at least the unidentified assailant. Here is Richard Threlkeld once again.
The man in the middle of this picture, surrounded by a phalanx of policemen, is the suspect accused in the shooting of Senator Kennedy. a bushy-haired, swarthy, complected man who was seized in the kitchen area of the Ambassador Hotel by Rayford Johnson, who had been traveling with the senator. The suspect was booked on suspicion of assault with intent to commit murder and has refused thus far to identify himself. Fingerprints of the young, short, swarthy suspect were turned over to the FBI for a check. He was described as 25 to 28 years old with short, bushy hair. Police said the suspect was questioned about 15 minutes and appeared to understand English. However, he has thus far refused to talk except to answer yes at one point. Richard Threlkeld, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Obviously, in that film, those few people who were standing nearby the police station as the man was put in the car moved to emotional outbursts and a great deal of emotion in literally being pushed by their own desires to get at the suspect. Whatever reporting follows in these next hours and these next days, it should be borne in mind that all of the details of the tragedy that involve the man who has been apprehended by police and who is now in custody are preliminary reports. They should be treated as nothing more than that. No matter what kind of facts do come out, the assumption in the American system is that a man is innocent until he is proved guilty in a court of law. And any determination on the suspect you saw in that film or whatever else is revealed should, of course, be held by you and by the nation in general until a court of law has had a chance to determine this case and until a jury decides the guilt or innocence of the man apprehended as the assailant of Senator Kennedy and 4 other persons early today, shortly after midnight at Los Angeles time, at the Ambassador Hotel. The man who turned what was a victory celebration, a double-barrel celebration, really, the South Dakota primary and the California primary, both Kennedy victories, quickly turned into a tragedy in brief seconds as 8 shells were fired from a .22 caliber revolver, 2 shells hitting Senator Kennedy, 2 bullets hitting Senator Kennedy, and then it's still not clear as to whether it was ricochets or the same bullets passing through the senator, but other persons being hit. None of them, at least at this reporting, seriously wounded other than the senator. One of those hit was an employee of the American Broadcasting Company, a stage manager, William Weissel, and he was waiting to be wheeled into surgery. He said that he felt that he was going to die instantly when he was hit, apparently hit 3 times. This is the Good Samaritan Hospital where the operation on Senator Kennedy began more than 2 hours ago. Our crews are standing by there, but still no indication as to whether the 6-man neurosurgical team has completed its operation on the senator. No report yet, other than one that's more than 2 hours old now, as to the senator's condition, which then was very critical. The bullet had lodged in his brain, and that, of course, was the neurosurgical team's major job, was to retrieve that bullet and, if possible, minimize whatever damage it might have done. Reaction is coming in from all over the world to what has happened to Senator Kennedy. As might be expected, the main theme is one of shock and horror and repetition of the often stated assumption that that kind of thing happens in America with too great a frequency. The assassination of President John F. Kennedy in 1963, early this year the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, and following now the attempted assassination of Senator Robert Kennedy. The Pope Paul in the Vatican said that he was shocked and deeply saddened by this horrible event. In London, the morning newspapers, the headlines were big and black, telling that the senator had been shot. In Moscow, a radio announcer in grave and deep tones told Russians that there had been an attempt to assassinate the senator. Radio and television stations from Berlin to Manila were broadcasting the news. The reaction was nearly universal. This is the Good Samaritan Hospital. There seems to be some activity.
Give us some audio.
Someone stepping up on top of a car, very possibly Frank Mankiewicz. Yes, it's the press secretary to Senator.
As we announced earlier, the president has ordered all presidential candidates to be guarded by the Secret Service effective immediately. As we are waiting for further report on the condition of Senator Edward Kennedy, let's switch live to Harold Fishman and the KTLA Telemobile.
Hard, we have just been called blood pressure, and that's all they say. Surgery, he's in surgery. Mrs. Kennedy is with him. Senator Ted Kennedy has arrived at the hospital, and the doctors now say surgery will last another hour and perhaps two.
Have the doctors given you any idea of the extent of the brain damage?
Nothing beyond what I said. Frank, what time?
There's the announcement.
Senator's press secretary said the surgery would last another hour and possibly even 2 hours. That would be a total of 4 hours spent by a 6-man neurosurgical team with Senator Kennedy at the Good Samaritan Hospital. David Dick is at the Good Samaritan Hospital. David?
Let me recap now exactly what Mr. Mankiewicz said, in case you did not hear the entire broadcast. He said that Senator Robert Kennedy has been in surgery now for 2 hours. The doctors estimate that he will be in surgery for at least another hour, perhaps 2 hours. However, he said also that the life signs are considered good by the doctors. This means respiration, heartbeat, pulse, and the result is that at the present time, he said he would go no farther than that, merely to say that his wife Ethel is with him, that his brother, Senator Edward Kennedy, is also in the hospital at this time. And so that is the latest information from the press secretary to...
That was a local Los Angeles news reporter. We were using the facilities of one of the Los Angeles television stations, their mobile unit. We have a correspondent, David Dick, standing by. The station KTLA's mobile unit provided us with that picture, and the reporter was, I believe it was Hal Fishman, but I'm not sure the exact name, relaying to us what Frank Mankiewicz told the gathered press there. The operation on Senator Kennedy apparently going to last another hour, possibly even 2 hours, which would be a total of more than 4 hours in the operating room. The surgery began little more than 2 hours ago, and at that time, it was a rather grave announcement from Mankiewicz, and he has not really clarified it in terms of specifics as to where that bullet is and what has been achieved by the neurosurgeons. The man who shot at Senator Kennedy refuses to identify himself, or at least the alleged assailant, the man who is being held in custody by the police. He has only said one word since his arrest, as a matter of fact, and that one word was yes. This report comes from Police Chief Thomas Redden of Los Angeles. His words exactly about the suspect. He just sits there and says nothing. The man is the only known suspect. The gunman fired all 8 shots in an Ivor Johnson .22 caliber pistol, which in an incident which occurred shortly after Senator Kennedy and his supporters were celebrating their victory in the California primary and the South Dakota primary. And the senator had just turned, stepped down from the speaker's platform, gone through a door, about to make his way through a hallway to a kitchen, and then, of course, hoping that he could avoid crowds and throngs throughout the Ambassador Hotel and perhaps relax just a little bit. As we noted, and undoubtedly will be noted for you throughout this day, there is terrible irony in the Kennedy family. Just today alone, an incident reported by Roger Mudd, a recollection that when he was interviewing the senator, he noticed a bump over the senator's right eye. And this was shortly before midnight in Los Angeles. He asked what it was, and he was told that while the senator and his family, those of his family who were in Los Angeles, Mrs. Kennedy and some of the children, were at Malibu today, relaxing, waiting for the vote tabulation to come in. One of the sons, and I believe Roger said the 12-year-old son David, went out into the surf to enjoy that wonderful surf there, and apparently got caught in an undertow, also a very strong undertow, and apparently was in great jeopardy, and the senator raced into the surf to pull his son out, according to Roger, saving his life, and in the process getting bumped in the head. And again, as I said, just another of the tragic kind of ironies that seem to plague the Kennedys. This is another of the Kennedy sons who has now suffered a tragedy. The first was Joseph Jr., killed in World War II in a mission he had volunteered to serve in. When he didn't have to, he was able to return home. He was the one, of course, that the family had hoped would someday run for president. And in the tradition of the Kennedy family, all of the Kennedy sons followed where the others failed. The next was John F. Kennedy, assassinated in 1963. Ted Kennedy, nearly killed in an airplane accident, and now Robert F. Kennedy, shot by an unidentified assailant at the Ambassador Hotel, critically wounded, being operated on at the Good Samaritan Hospital in an operation that has now surpassed 2 hours, and according to Frank Mankiewicz, will well go another hour and possibly 2 more hours. Jim Brown, correspondent with KNXT in Los Angeles, is on our beeper line. Jim?
Joe, I'm at police headquarters here in Los Angeles, but I've just come from Central Receiving Hospital, where I talked with two of the people who were very intimately involved in the early hours of this incident tonight. The first was Max Berman, an ambulance attendant. He's been an ambulance attendant for 20 years, was on the call to the Ambassador Hotel. He said that when he arrived at the scene where the senator was, when he knelt down to pick up the senator to put him on the stretcher, the senator said to him, "Don't lift me, don't lift me." Berman later said that that was the only time that Senator Kennedy spoke during the entire trip from the ambassador to the hospital. Berman also said that Mrs. Kennedy was quite reluctant to have any assistance at that time, even from the hospital attendants. Their efforts to put a compress, a cold pack of some kind on the senator's head. Even in the ambulance coming down to Central Receiving Hospital, she was reluctant to the point of physically trying to keep them away from the senator. I also talked with Dr. Basilowskis, who was the doctor in attendance at Central Receiving. He said that when Senator Kennedy was first brought in, the first glance he felt that the senator had expired, as he put it, that he was dead on arrival. But then as he began to check Senator Kennedy, he saw there was some life, and he said that one of the actions he took in trying to get a response was to slap him several times in the face, along with some type of medical treatment, and say, "Bob, Bob, Bob." And he saw that there was life in the senator, that there was a good heartbeat, and at that time he said he took the stethoscope and put it on Mrs. Kennedy's ears. She was in the room at the time, and then she could hear the heartbeat of the senator to see that he was alive. From that point, then the senator was shipped over to Good Samaritan Hospital.
Thank you very much, Jim. Jim Brown of KNXT News in Los Angeles. We were noting just before that report from Los Angeles the irony that tends to plague the Kennedys. Just before the tragic incident, the senator was delivering a speech to his supporters who were gathered in the Ambassador Hotel. And the subject, aside from the rather jocular comments that he made, which have become quite typical of his speaking during the campaign, apparently an effort to rid himself of that ruthless image, the term applied to him so often, to show that he had a sense of humor and to establish an amiable relationship with his audiences. He did have a serious theme tonight, and it touched on violence in America. Here are some of the quotes. "I think we can end the divisions within the United States. We can work together to overcome divisions, violence, disenchantment. We can start to work together. We are a great country, a selfless country, a compassionate country." What all of these primaries have indicated, Senator Kennedy said just before the shooting incident, and all of the party caucuses have indicated, was that the people in the Democratic Party and the United States want to change. And he said he hoped now to concentrate on having a dialogue or a debate. He said that he hopes that he would have good fortune in his campaign. And yet the theme of his speech was an end to violence and division. Almost the same phrase used by President Johnson in his statement released early this morning. The president was informed rather quickly of what had happened. He got up in the private chambers of the White House, watched television for some time to find out exactly what he could learn, and then issued a statement. And the statement was simple and to the point. It said, "There are no words equal to the horror of this tragedy. Our thoughts and prayers are with Senator Kennedy, his family, and the other victims. All America prays for his recovery. We also pray that divisiveness and violence can be driven from the hearts of men everywhere." At about the same time, Ramsey Clark, the Attorney General, announced that the FBI was entering the investigation. He said that he had that power under the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act of 1968 and the earlier Voting Rights Act to send in the Federal Bureau of Investigation, but he insisted, at this time at least, the main investigation will be carried by local law enforcement agencies. Other reactions, Vice President Humphrey, who today was scheduled to speak at the Air Force Academy's commencement address, commencement ceremonies, canceled his commencement speech and flew back to Washington, as did Senator McCarthy, who canceled all of his campaign plans and flew back to Washington. Correspondent Terry Drinkwater is standing by now in Los Angeles at the Ambassador Hotel. Terry?
It was here, Joe, in this anteroom of the Ambassador Hotel, just with the kitchen beyond it, that Kennedy was hit. The police have just completed their preliminary investigation, and with me is Sergeant James MacArthur of the Los Angeles Police Department. Sergeant, is this where Kennedy fell finally after being hit?
That's approximate spot right there where the white X is, yes.
Now, as we understand it, he was down the way here, shaking hands with some of the help from the hotel. When this
yes, apparently as he was coming along, he was reaching over, shaking hands with the different kitchen help, and continued shaking hands and walking this way. When he reached a point somewhere in here, he reached over to shake hands with one of the kitchen help, and at this time, from back over here in a crowd of people, the apparent suspect came up, reached up, and fired several shots. According to witnesses, the shots could have been anywhere from 1 to 5 or 6. At this time, the senator apparently fell back over there.
Back down over here.
There. At this time, several of the people in the party grabbed the suspect and disarmed him.
Now, exactly where was the suspect when he fired the first shot? You say the senator was approximately here.
The senator was somewhere here, reaching over, and the suspect apparently came from back over in this area and approached and reached up and fired at the senator at fairly close range.